Before we get started, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let us explain.
Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast straight from your phone or computer.
When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
It is everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
And best of all, Anchor is totally free.
Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
It's Monday, and you know what that means.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Searching for MacGuffin proudly brings to you your host, George.
Gabe.
And Link. And we're back with new gear in preparation for full gear. And also, quick question, which children are listening to this podcast?
I think my niece.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our niece.
She's an avid supporter. Right?
Okay, yeah. She contributes to our Patreon.
Yeah. So keep those likes and your support, your financial support coming.
Yes, Zoe, please do.
All right. So today's topic is the hottest sports entertainment thing in the world.
Woo!
And this is the term that Link came up with when we were asking, like, what should we talk about? This is the verbiage that he came up with, which is apropos for the medium.
Yeah, Link came up with this, and I instantly fell in love with it. And I'm kind of the one that really fought for it to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I stand by it. I think that's a very awesome term for what we're going to be discussing today.
Yeah, and you're probably wondering, what is the hottest sports entertainment thing in the world? What is sports entertainment? Today's topic is a kind of a niche product. It may not be as mainstream as some of the other things we've talked about, video games, Star Wars, Marvel, etc. But it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and we all have like varying degrees of like love for, and that is professional wrestling.
Yes.
Pro wrestling. So you might be asking yourself, what is pro wrestling? I think there's probably like a lot of cliches out there of like what people expect pro wrestling to be. What do you guys think of when you think of pro wrestling?
Personally, I think from before it's been like varying degrees of what I think it is. Before I used to think it was just people having street fights inside of a gym, inside of an arena, and just beating the crap out of each other with whatever they found under the ring, like tables and chairs and bats and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, as in everything, with time, your perspective starts to change. And right now, I would just say that I think pro wrestling is kind of a performance in a sense, but it's kind of like stuntmen being like actual actors and just going all out with their performances, with their stunts and with their acting.
Yeah.
For me, professional wrestling is a story of good and evil. Except the characters are wearing tights. And that's the best way I can describe it.
So just good versus evil?
In tights.
Yeah.
So it's basically Star Wars in tights.
Yeah. It's essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
No lightsabers.
Yeah. It's, well, I don't know, kendo sticks?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned like the chairs and the big burly men, because that's like that outlaw identity is so much of what shapes.
I don't like that.
Yeah. But what when I was thinking about, okay, what are we gonna say? What is pro wrestling? What is it about it? Why is it that we love it? What is that like that driving force that draws us back to it? I was actually reading John Moxley, who's a popular wrestler. His autobiography came out recently, and he actually defined it in a I think a really appropriate way. In his book, he says wrestling can be anything. It's everything. It's world-class athletes. It's Broadway, Shakespeare, summer blockbusters, best-selling novels, soap operas, high art. It's nobodies from nowhere finding a way to say to the world, F you. It's entertainment, it's movies, it's music, it's everything.
In tights.
In tights, yeah. Especially, well, in some well, he actually doesn't wear tights.
Oh, he wears
so,
jeans, yeah.
Yeah, so actually, tights optional.
Yeah, okay.
BYOT or don't?
Bring your own tights.
Yeah.
That was a very poetic description of what we basically just said it's a battle of good and evil, or it's performances and stuntmen.
Yeah. So you're probably think it's fake fighting, right? That's what a lot of people, unless you're in tune,
Yeah,
like
the blood is ketchup.
yeah, you're into the culture. Also, spoilers: the blood's not real in all the movies and TV shows that we watch, but
It's
it
real in
actually is.
wrestling.
Yeah. So maybe it's more real than some of the other things that we talk about here. But at its crux, it is that, like Link said, fight for good and evil. It's storytelling. It's character driven. And the best way that I can put it is it's not a sport. It's a show about a sport. You know? It's like when I watch Rocky, nobody goes, oh, this is so fake, bro. Stallone cannot take this guy. You know? Or Rocky can't take this guy, right? Because you're kind of in, and it's almost like when we talk about superheroes, and to me it's superheroes, you know, it's larger than life, doing things that like a regular normal person couldn't do. But how did we get here? Like, what is its origin? So in order to talk about that, I guess we need a little bit of background, and I'm going to do like a super crash course for those of you that may not be in tune with the history of wrestling. And it's not going to be sufficient enough to like really get an understanding, but professional wrestling comes out of the carnival tradition, and it's basically shows that they put on. Like you would go to, basically the circus would be in town, and there were the games that, you know, you play, and they would put on these shows, and it wasn't, back in the day, they would pretend like it was real, right? So you were supposed to believe that it was real. And eventually that involved years, you know, pass on. And when I was born, I was at the tail end of a tradition known as the territory system. I don't know if you guys have heard about this.
Oh, I have, yeah.
Yeah. What do you know about the territory system?
It's territories of different promotions, you know, of wrestling promotions.
Right. So the country was basically like split in different regions, and you had different companies that kind of control those regions. You have the North Wrestling Alliance, the North American Wrestling Alliance, which was like a body that kind of a lot of the companies were a part of. But then you had like AWA, you had the WWF, in like
Three W's?
Yeah, they used to be the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. That was Vince Senior's company. So if you guys know who Vince McMahon is, he's kind of like a big icon. And if you were alive in the 90s, you probably know who Vince McMahon is. Or if you're, you know, if you know the friends that the circles that he runs in. But his father actually owned the company that he would eventually buy, and it was the WWF. And they weren't part of the North American Wrestling Alliance, the North Wrestling Alliance, the NWA, but they were like, they would work together, and all the regions kind of like work together, but they all had their own regional champions and everything. And it's actually Vince Jr. who comes around the 80s, around the time I was born in 84, and 84 is the first year of WrestleMania. So I like to think that like the WWF tradition and me, like they kind of like grow up together, because in 84 he launches this like worldwide show, the Super Bowl, right? If you know about WrestleMania, and I don't know what your experiences have been with WrestleMania, but it's kind of like the Super Bowl of professional wrestling. And he buys up a lot of the talents, and he kind of unifies them. Over time, a lot of those territories kind of go out of business, and we see the emergence of the national promotion. So for lack of time, I'm just going to like speed up to like me growing up. And I grew up, it was like Saturday morning cartoons. I was a kid. Wrestling is like what I used to basically live for, because it was like this relationship between me and my father, and that's how I was introduced. How were you guys introduced to wrestling?
You guys, my uncles, my family.
I was channel surfing when I was 7. And I'm like, what is this? Why are men wearing tights wrestling?
And what did you see?
I think it was The Rock. I saw The Rock there. And this is, it was just The Rock wrestling. I'm not sure who was wrestling. I want to say Stone Cold, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't Stone Cold. But The Rock was there, and I'm like, okay, what is this? And it just grabbed my attention.
Yeah, it was probably some random jabroni building to a fight with Stone Cold,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So my father introduced me to it, and I remember going to the Royal Rumble, like in, I believe it was 92 here at the Miami Arena. Rest in peace, Miami Arena. Yeah. And I had like a fake belt. Like I didn't have a replica belt. I had a weightlifting belt that I bought WWF stickers from like one of those sticker machines. Also, rest in peace, sticker machines. And
For real, now they're so expensive.
yeah, and then I would just place the stickers on a weightlifting belt, and that was my championship, you know. And I didn't have like to buy a costume, so my dad was from New York, and I was born in New York. So there was this wrestler called the Brooklyn Brawler, and he was what is known as a jobber, which means he does the job. That means he puts over the other talent. So he's a loser, right? He loses all the time. But he was from Brooklyn, and he would wear a Yankees shirt, and I had a Yankees shirt, and he had like torn shoes because he was like a street fighter, and I had some torn shoes. So I put on my weightlifting belt, and I went to my show, and I think that was like the moment where we were off to the races, and it was like going to Blockbuster, renting VHS tapes, you know, catching up on the history of WWF at the time.
They dropped the W.
Yeah, they dropped the W when Vince bought it. They dropped the W. They were the World Wrestling instead of Worldwide Wrestling. And as you probably will remember, they'll eventually drop the F too.
It's probably because the internet took it.
What?
The World Wide Web.
I don't. No,
They took the wide.
I don't think they took it like in '84 or '83 whenever Vince rebranded.
No, they took it. That's my headcanon.
Yeah. So there was a big promotion like in the early 2000s because it was a funny story, side story. Vince had an agreement with the World Wildlife Fund. You've seen like the pandas and stuff.
WWF, yeah.
Yeah, I was really confused by like I'd see WWF commercials and it was just a bunch of pandas and I was like, this is a weird product to throw into wrestling.
It works, you know, the cross promotion.
Like they just fight pandas. Like,
so basically they had an agreement like, okay, you can be the WWF because the World Wildlife Fund had it first, but you can't operate outside of like North America, like the U.S., I believe. And then Vince was just like, nah, I'm going to do it though. So then the panda people sued him, and then he had to change the company to WWE. And then they had a big promotion that was like, get the F out.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah, which is kind of clever, the promotion, but also they forced you to do it because you lost the, you know.
So you're the one that's getting out.
Yeah, exactly.
Not them.
So they try to turn it into a positive. But that was the Attitude Era. And the Attitude Era was like in the late 90s. And so WWF was, like I said, like kind of Saturday morning cartoons, and it was for kids and stuff, and it wasn't super popular in like the early 90s. That was after like the Hulk Hogan boom, which I grew up with as history, but I wasn't around for it. You know, that was done around 92, and it was a whole nother generation. But then the Attitude Era was like when it became mainstream, like super pop culture, which was Vince's goal the whole time. Like Hulk Hogan, rockin' wrestling, you know, bringing in like pop stars and getting them on TV. That was like his goal. And he finally hit mainstream in the 90s. I don't know if you guys have memories of this stuff. Vaguely? Or too young?
Vaguely.
Right. Well, this is the emergence of like Stone Cold, the Rock, you know, and if you think about it, these guys are like national like heroes now, right? Like icons, especially Dwayne Johnson.
Yes. You watch a Bad Bunny music video and they're Stone Cold.
And Booker T.
And so that's super funny because like probably this generation only knows these guys as people inside Bad Bunny music videos, but like I only know who Bad Bunny is because of Stone Cold and Booker T.
Yeah, I don't know the Bad Bunny songs. I just know them. Oh, that's the song with Stone Cold, the song with Booker T, the song with Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Listen, Bad Bunny is a cultural phenomenon, and he's an undefeated wrestler.
He is.
That's right.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's true. That's good.
Well, didn't he get eliminated in the Royal Rumble?
Was he in the Royal Rumble?
Yeah.
I don't
No, I have no
think
idea.
that's accurate. Oh, you just threw that out there.
Yeah, I didn't watch it.
Nah, Bad Bunny has a better record than The Undertaker.
Also, it's not a loss to get eliminated in the Royal Rumble.
It doesn't count your lost record?
I mean, that's literally a guy throws you over the rope to the outside. Like, it's not, you didn't lose.
You got the F out of here.
Okay. There's a lot of that today. So, after that comes an era that's not as popular. Like, it kind of wanes. It stops. Like, everything, like, it goes out of fashion. And that's like the ruthless aggression era.
And this is where I come in. This is where I start watching wrestling, which is like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like I said, like I was channel surfing one day, and I'm like, what is this? Who is this guy and is wearing black underwear? His name's The Rock. Very charismatic, very electrifying. And ever since then, I start watching it, right? So I grew up watching what you call the ruthless aggression era, right? Which is, I don't know specifically what time it is.
I think it starts like
2000
After Stone Cold, yeah, it's about
Yeah.
2001. Like after Stone Cold retires, The Rock's still there for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the passing of the torch to
He's like already in Raw. He's not in SmackDown.
exactly, and it's more like now the generation is gonna be like the John Cena, the Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. So that's when I come in, right? And one thing about me, because you'll never tell, because you could only hear my voice, is that I'm not the tallest person ever. I'm short. I'm like 5'5.5", depending on the shoe. I'm 5'6". And I was always the shortest person in my class, right?
Right.
But one thing I loved about wrestling is that there was this wrestler. He was a luchador from Mexico. His name was Rey Mysterio, and this guy was literally like 5'2", 5'3", right? And as the smallest person in my class for like
I think he's 5'4", but he gets like shoot taller. I know he was 5'3" in WCW supposedly. And
maybe he
keeps,
grew.
Yeah, I don't think he grows like as an adult, but he keeps growing in stats, I think.
So he grew, right? Yeah, a little bit. But like I said, I was the shortest person in my class for like 10 years. And while I was channel surfing, I've discovered that my friends also watched it.
Right.
So we would call each other on the phone every Thursday night to watch SmackDown on UPN, channel 33.
Ooh, rest in peace,
Rest
UPN.
in peace, UPN.
We're mourning a lot of losses today.
And I remember I'd be talking to my best friend McGarley. We'd be on the phone talking about what we were just watching, right? And then we'd hang up at 10 because that's when it would end. And then the next day at school, on Friday, we would talk about it again, and we would talk about it the whole week. And I remember I would always be talking about this wrestler named Rey Mysterio because he was so short, but he was he was just electrifying in my opinion. He was he used a lot of high-flying moves. Moves where you're on the air doing backflips, front flips.
Yeah, a lot of acrobatics.
Acrobatics, exactly. That's a lucha libre style, right? And during that era, it's also where you get people like Eddie Guerrero, who was already there, but this is where he starts to become popular. And you have him, you have, like you said, Brock Lesnar. Kurt Angle comes from winning the Olympics. He comes to SmackDown. You have Rob Van Dam, Edge. The SmackDown 6, pretty much.
Yeah.
John Cena's also coming up. Undertaker's becoming a legend. His brother Kane is also there. So that's the era I grew up in watching wrestling. And I remember it was from 3rd grade all the way to 5th grade. Because in 5th grade, they should switch the day of wrestling from Thursday to Friday.
Right.
And I should stop watching. Like, I had stuff to do on Friday.
Yeah.
And that's when I stopped watching wrestling. Like, I would keep up with it. Like, people would tell me. And, like, I would watch big shows like WrestleMania and the Royal Rumble and what's the one in summer? SummerSlam.
SummerSlam, right.
But that's it. Like, I wouldn't keep up with it as I was watching it before, like, weekly.
Yeah. That's super funny that you mentioned that you stopped watching when, like, the night changed. That happened to me all throughout because I'm a lifetime wrestling fan. And that happened to me all throughout where it would be like, oh, this show's on cable now. And, like, I didn't have cable at that time. So
Yeah, that's why I never watched Raw because I didn't grow up with cable.
Right.
SmackDown was always on.
So I
local.
remember when we first got AOL, you had to dial up and you had like the limited hours and they had hubs. Like AOL had their own channels and it would be like me downloading pictures and like for those of you growing up now who don't remember what this was like, downloading a picture took like 20 minutes and it would just be like click, click, click. And when I first did it, I didn't even know that they saved to your computer. So I would re-download the same picture over and over again just to watch them. But it would be like, I only would read what happened and see pictures and make up the stories in my mind because I had no idea what was going on. And it's like so many times that happens, the channel will change, the night will change or something, and then you lose people.
Yeah. That's what happened to me. You lost me. You switched the channel. You lost my friends as well because everyone just had stuff to do on Friday nights. And we just stopped talking about wrestling and that's it. Oh, it's funny too. Like we stopped talking about wrestling and we kind of grew apart from each other. So maybe it was wrestling that was
drew you together.
It was a driving force to our relationship.
Yeah.
But that's how I like got into wrestling. And later on, I go back at it, and I'll talk about that later. But that's how I start with wrestling.
Yeah, that social aspect is also super important. Like not just loving a thing, but having someone to share it with.
Yes.
What about you, Gabe?
Yeah, I definitely think that social aspect is what got me into wrestling. Since I was very young when I started watching, it was mostly because of you guys, like my uncles and my grandpa. And I remember watching a lot of The Rock, a lot of Stone Cold. The one that really captivated me was Shawn Michaels.
Yeah,
and
all time great.
And he was just incredible to watch. him and The Rock, I think, are the ones that like really kept me in it. And then the other wrestlers that had their like pretty memorable I don't say gimmicks, but like who their personas,
Yeah.
like Undertaker and Kane, his brother. And I
mean,
remember,
those are definitely gimmicks.
but yeah, those types of personas, those gimmicks are kind of was like, man, this is really interesting to me, because obviously as a kid, like you don't want to kind of subjugate your kids to like violence and that sort of, even
Right.
though that's kind of like how it came up to me, how I kind of like, I was watching it for a while and then I kind of stopped watching it just kind of because my parents were just kind of like, we don't want you watching this. Grown men attacking each other and brutally beating each other and stuff like that.
You know, bleeding, you know.
And that kind of like, at first it was kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. And then rebellious me, as soon as either my parents left the house, I'm turning on reruns of Raw or something like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that the social aspect of my family watch, it was a family thing for me, really got me into it. And like Link said, I think a part of how I came out of it was growing up, I just had different priorities. The things I was interested in started to change. And I remember, I think I grew up one time and then someone kind of dropped a bomb where it was like, they used the F word.
Oh no, yeah, that's
Ooh, the Rock's gonna get mad if you say it.
That's a banned word here. I don't know if we can say that.
I won't, but
No, I mean, I think you need to provide context for the listeners.
no, I think it's just I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's not the curse word.
It's not the F word. It's the
yeah.
other F word, which is probably worse in wrestling
Yeah.
circles.
I guess we can say it context-wise. It makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
I
I was
was-
explaining it.
yeah,
Like when
I
you
was
explain
told-
it to a child, like this is a bad word and you're not supposed to say it.
Yeah.
So I was told, or I don't know how I found out, but somehow it was the bomb dropped on me that wrestling was fake. That none of it was real. That they were basically kind of just like performing. That I think what really
Pretending to fight, is that how it was described
yeah, exactly,
to?
yeah. Like none of it's real. Like
That's ketchup. That's not
Yeah.
basically yeah. And I think what
It
broke
doesn't
me-
hurt.
I think what broke me was when I found out that Kane and Undertaker weren't actually brothers. That part, I was just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He's not from hell? Like, what do you mean?
I was so sure.
What do you mean? The past, like, 6 people that Undertaker buried alive, they're not dead?
No, their contracts just expired.
They got rebranded.
So I think after that, like, I kind of just, I kind of stopped until later on, which we will get to.
Yeah, that's super funny because I had a similar situation with Edge and Christian. Because when they first came out, they're like, these two brothers from Toronto. They're brothers. They're close. They're friends. Like, over the years, it was like, wait, are they brothers or are they not brothers? They're not brothers. Okay, they're just like adolescent friends. They're like childhood friends. But then I didn't believe that either. I was like, that's a lie too. No, it's actually true though.
No, it's like me and Link, how we convinced the world that we were cousins.
Oh, yeah.
In my heart, we are.
Kayfabe.
And then somehow, like, that ended up changing into Link actually being my uncle-in-law.
Yeah, that's actually technically, it's just easier to explain cousin.
Didn't say uncle.
Yeah.
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 Oh, my sister is married to his uncle.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it was fake or pretend, and that's kind of some of the hang-ups or the concepts that people have about it. And I think it's funny because we run in these circles and like we've been around quote unquote the industry for so many years that it's like second nature to us. But there's still a lot of people out there. I see my kids at school argue about whether it's real or not. And to me, it was always like a show. It was always choreographed. I guess my dad, quote unquote, smartened me up like really early. Yeah. And life is like, this is not real. But what is real is like the toughness, right? What's real is a lot of the injuries, just the physicality of it. Yes, it's coordinated. Yes, it's choreographed. But so much of the risk inherently and kind of the pain threshold of it. And you can't really understand it unless you've tried it for yourself, which, like, in a sense, I think any fan eventually does try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your experiences with that?
Oh, so like I said, when I was in elementary school watching SmackDown, meet with my friends, we would, during recess, we would go to the playground and wrestle. and that's what we did. We would just wrestle, but none of us were brave enough to actually do some of the moves on each other. Like,
Right.
no one ever did a suplex or anything like that.
Oh.
Because I guess we weren't strong enough and we didn't know how to do it properly. But it was just us pretty much rolling with each other, and it was boring. But for us, it felt like it was WrestleMania.
Yeah, I think at some point I feel like I kind of took it further because I would do it with obviously with you guys at home. We just like wrestle each other, and I kind of took that to school one time.
Right.
I had just gotten like a digital camera, and I don't know why I don't even know, like I'm just remembering this now, was I set up the digital camera in the cafeteria of our school, and I basically started a Royal Rumble. I had a bunch of classmates, and then people just kind of tagged along when they saw us what we were doing.
Yeah.
And we were basically just like fighting each other, like play fighting, but like some of it we were actually like throwing each other around. I remember specifically there was one point where it was just chaos. People were fighting, and you can see me in the corner of the shot, and I wish I still had that video, but you can see me in the corner of the shot, and I just I don't know why, I just speared one of my really good friends into like it wasn't like an actual wall, it was kind of like tarp-ish, like the sides. And I remember like I would just replay that shot on the digital camera like for such a long time. Like, I really can't believe I did this. And like there's just a ton of different stories that I have like that, where it's kind of just like we kind of take on this wrestling approach to let's say the performances, I guess.
Right.
And I didn't realize that until now. It kind of just clicked how, I mean, wrestling did have an effect on like me as a kid, just wanting to like put on a basic quote unquote a show. And yeah, and I mean, there's other experiences, I guess, with this show that I think you have a better light to shed on.
Yeah, it's funny because, like you said, like it just came flooding in, and it was like, oh man, I have like 15 of them. But I think it just all starts like intramural period. So some of the kids read, some of the kids take a long lunch, some of the kids work out in the gym. We went straight to the mats, and like the athletic director, guys, get off the mats. Now we're practicing our gymnastics. Oh, okay. It was a different time, So it was a lot of that, and I'll remember there was like a fall festival, right, where they had like everyone coming in, and they had a big bounce house, and we're like, you have to pay to get on the bounce house. So we're like, if we can like block off an hour of time on the bounce house, we buy every slot that hour, we can just have matches, and like we'll plan them, and we'll have our finishes and everything. And then people started congregating during the hour, right? And then we started getting like really complicated with it. We're like, all right, you're gonna pin them, but then this third person's gonna run in and interfere. Like, we started doing our like all our like storyline plots, and then the attendant at the bounce is like, you can't jump in, there's two people inside. And then they're like, all right, your hour's up. And they're like, oh, we didn't get to the finals because we had bracketed a tournament. I don't know how this happened during the course of the hour. And then we're like, oh, there's still 4 guys in the tournament, we have to have a 4-way. And they're like, I bet there's no one in the music room anymore. So we go up to the music room, and we just destroyed the music room. Like, everybody was just like, I remember tackling someone through like an aluminum trash can, and it just like just compressing, and I was like, that was the coolest thing I've ever done.
By the way, I love how this school that we all went to just
We all
randomly
same
had
school, yeah.
wrestling weapons just lying around in different departments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not me. I'm a purist. I don't like wrestling weapons. So
That's true.
When I did my federation with my friends, it was all our bodies.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, elitist link.
That's funny too, because when we talk about wrestling being everything, I could show you 10 wrestling matches and not one of them would be the same. Yeah. Like, there's the hardcore style, which is those like weapons, like no rules. Link is like shaking his head and putting like a grimace on his face right now. Then there's like the like mat-based technician, which is like either like Olympic style amateur wrestling, or it can be like MMA, like ground grappling, jiu-jitsu.
Is that your style, Link?
Yeah, I prefer anything other than that's not hardcore.
Elitist link.
Yeah.
No, I just don't like hardcore, man.
Yeah,
I don't
you're just
It
what
looks
you're
like it hurts
squeamish.
these people. Yeah, blood, thumbtacks,
It all hurts though. It all hurts.
barbed wire.
Yeah, but you like a superplex off like 6-foot turnbuckle
Yeah.
into plywood.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, and then there's a high flying, like you mentioned, lucha libre. It's regional too. It's like Japan has their own tradition.
Japan, England has their own tradition.
Mexico has their own tradition. You know, even American and Canadian styles, which are similar, they're distinct. You know, and it's funny because so much of this of our interest, what we like, it comes in waves. And I don't know about you, but for me, it definitely. Like, there's periods where I'm really, really, really hot into it, and there's periods where I'm really, really cold. And usually it had to do with, like, the leader in the industry, which is, you know, World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yeah, WWE.
Yeah, when everyone thinks about wrestling, they think about WWE. You know, they think about The Rock, John Cena, you know, whoever is famous now. Probably most people can't tell you anyone. But there's been an emerging league, a new league that's on the horizon that's kind of caught our attention and kind of like rejuvenated our passion for it. Can you guys tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So like I said, I watched wrestling from like 3rd grade to 5th or 6th grade, and I stopped watching it because they switched days. And in my opinion, the product did not get better; it got worse. So I just stopped watching it. But there was a time, I think it was 2012, right? That WrestleMania decided to come. I mean, WWE decided to do WrestleMania in Miami.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is when WrestleMania comes to a city, smaller promotions take their shows to that city because that's where the hardcore fans are going to be at, right? So they make money that weekend, WrestleMania weekend.
And they come from all over.
They come from all over
the country, all over the world, yeah.
So I think it was it 2012?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, 2012. Yeah, WrestleMania came to Miami, and so did other small promotions, right? And the small promotions, like their tickets are not they're cheap.
Yeah,
much,
they're
right?
cheap.
Like $20, right? And I remember I went with George,
right,
and my brother and other people, my sister as well. We went to watch. It was a Dragon's Gate USA, right?
USA, yeah.
And like I said, I grew up watching WWE, but the wrestling here in this promotion was different. It was fun. It was comedy, but at the same time, it was more acrobatic, in my opinion. And I was just blown away by some of these wrestlers. Like, there was this guy named Claudio Castagnoli, who's now Cesaro in WWE. There was Pac, who's Adrian Neville in WWE. And there was this one guy named El Generico, which is, his gimmick was pretty much that he was a generic luchador from Mexico, but the guy was actually Canadian. So his Spanish was like a broken Spanish. And I don't know why I started to gravitate towards this El Generico character.
Yeah.
Right? So I after this match, after watching this, I start watching like some of the smaller independent promotions where these guys are from. And this is 2012. I start watching that. And then from there, what happens is that WWE decides to pick up some of these these independent talents to this promotion that they have called NXT.
That's right. Yeah.
And they ended up picking up people like Tyler Black, who later becomes Seth Rollins, John Moxley, who later becomes Dean Ambrose, El Generico becomes Sami Zayn. So a lot of these independent talents ended up coming to WWE and for this brand called NXT, which is different from SmackDown and Raw. Now, when this happened, when my favorite wrestler got picked up by WWE, I started watching NXT. And WWE had their own network, right? Where they would just have NXT. And I remember George and I would watch it weekly. Was it every Wednesday?
Yeah, it was every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday we'd watch it. And I was in college by this time. But I would always text George, hey, did you watch NXT and stuff like that? We'd watch it, right? But because of that night in WrestleMania in Miami, I got really interested. George and I got really interested in independent wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what's going on right now, why there is a new league, it's because a lot of these independent wrestlers that were in that were there in Miami, they started to become a little bit more popular little by little, right?
Yeah.
Also with the rise of YouTube and people being able to share their own, creating their vlogs, and these wrestlers got more popular. An example of these these wrestlers I'm referring to are the Young Bucks. They're a tag team from Rancho Cucamonga, California. But I would love to live there just because I love that name, but it's terribly hot.
Yeah.
Right? So they start doing their thing. They start tearing it up in the independent scene, right? And then they have their friends Kenny Omega, who is here in the States, but then sometimes he's in Japan in this promotion called New Japan Pro Wrestling, which it's amazing, right? And with their little vlog called Being the Elite, they should start like popularizing wrestling.
Yeah.
To the point where it got so big that these stars themselves got so big, and their friends ended up becoming so big that they grabbed the attention of a billionaire called Tony Khan. Tony Khan, his father is, I don't know, Surge Khan?
No, it's not Shao Kahn. That's the Mortal Kombat character.
Yeah.
Shad
Khan, right? This
Wow,
guy
that's
is
actually really close though.
this guy is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's also the owner of a Premier League in England. I don't know what team.
Gabriel knows.
Fulham.
Fulham, whatever that means.
It's a name.
Are they full of ham? I don't know. So this guy actually has money, right? And this guy, what he does is that he contacts these people, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, and he tells them, hey, I want to start a promotion, and I have the money to back it up. Because by this time, they have different promotions, right?
Right.
But they're all independent. They are not They are not WWE's competition.
Yeah.
WWE does not have to worry about them because they're not billionaires.
Right. So, and just to point that out, so Tony Khan is a fan. I mean, just like
Hardcore fan.
Yeah, like one of us.
Probably more.
One of them.
But so we talked about the reason I gave the background on the territory system is because the independent system ends up being a lot like a resurgence of the territory system. And over the like 2000s, in the wake of the death of WCW, which we didn't even talk about that, World Championship Wrestling and Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, these were like the WCW was like the head-to-head rival with WWF, and ECW was kind of like, I don't know, like the indie label, right? The
like
Renegade.
NXT of it.
Right. So when they collapsed throughout the 2000s, we had emergence like Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor was a company that was really like counterculture.
TNA.
Yeah, in the early 2000s. And then TNA, which would then be known later as Impact Wrestling. And it was kind of like the super indie.
Yeah. Oh, in my opinion, the super indie is PWG.
Okay, yeah.
Pro
okay.
Wrestling Guerrillas promotion in California, where a lot of these talents that I'm talking about, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, even people that are in WWE right now, like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, they all, okay, I'm not sure about CM Punk. They all wrestled in PWG, and this is where they were before they got to WWE.
Right.
And this is where they became popular.
Yeah.
And a lot of these wrestlers that were in this PWG ended up getting I guess the three main I told you, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Cody, they ended up getting contacted by this billionaire called Tony Khan.
That's right.
And he, like George was saying, he's a hardcore wrestling fan, grew up with it, and he has a vision for it, right? And not only does he have a vision for it, he has the money to back it up. So he contacts the Young Bucks, he contacts Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes, and he shares his vision he has with them of a promotion called All Elite Wrestling. This is what, early 2017 when they start talking, right? And in 2019, AEW, All Elite Wrestling, has its first show on TNT. And this was what 2019 is 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So this was 2 years ago, and it's a promotion that was started pretty much by indie talent. Like the most popular name they got at the time was Chris Jericho,
Right.
who's
like a legend.
Who's like a legend, yeah.
Arguably go.
Rock star.
Yeah. So they got Chris Jericho to believe in this vision, and they got him. And from there, they started this promotion, and little by little, they started acquiring talent. And it's gotten to the point where they are so good that they beat WWE in ratings in the right demographic, which I'm not sure.
Right, not overall. And that's another thing. That's like a deep dive. People who are into wrestling, they get really into the weeds of it. So we're talking about like TV demographics. But yeah, the target demo, yeah, they beat them. Not overall. They're not as big.
They're not
overall,
as popular.
right.
But the targeted, like the one that matters, like 18 to 49.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense because that's all I see on Twitter now that I got back into wrestling. All wrestling Twitter is just demos this, demos that. I'm like, what is a demo? Like Demo God? Like Jericho? Like
Yeah, well, that's why he's the demo god. He came up with that nickname because his segments were getting the highest demo hits. on the show.
You see, I just learned that right now. I have heard
Yeah.
so many people call him the demo god, and I'm like, that's just his name. Like, okay, he's just a.
Is he the demigod?
Yeah.
Is he the,
I was just
yeah,
like,
no.
I mean, Demolition Man. I guess he's a really big fan of the movie, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because it's okay. So, kind of to talk a little cross cultural here, we talk about TV a lot here. We look at total ratings, but in reality, like television stations, they look at ad buy revenue and they sort those by the demo, 18 to 49. These are the people that spend the most money. This is the glut of your audience. They may not be the most overall, but they're the ones that people, or companies rather, are willing to pay advertising money to target. So when you actually rate shows, when you see the ratings come in, it's not who got 8 million, 7 million, 6 million, 5 million. It's who got 1.5 million, 1 million, 750,000 in the key demo. That's the number that they're sorted by.
Yeah, the key demo is the one that matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what AEW's been killing it in the demographics, and not only that, they were doing so well that they do so well. The wrestling is awesome.
Yeah.
The storytelling makes sense. They're not trying to make you feel like an idiot,
Right.
like WWE does. But this not only attracts the viewers, it attracts other wrestlers.
Right.
So we're at this point where right now, just recently, CM Punk, who was arguably one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and Daniel Bryan, who was in the Indies along with CM Punk, they now come. I guess I don't want to say they came back to the Indies because AEW isn't the Indies. 'Cause
Right.
They legit can't.
It's
compete.
on national television,
right? And
it's-
they have the money to back them up to compete against WWE. But they come back to this, and they're just destroying it. So not only is AEW stealing viewers, but now they're taking some of WWE's best wrestlers.
Right.
And it might get to the point where they're going to take more wrestlers because the wrestlers in WWE aren't satisfied there.
I want to talk a little bit about the frustrations that you kind of hinted at there. I'm not here to bash WWE.
I am.
Okay, yes, Link is.
Elitist Link.
I'm not here to bash anyone. I just like good wrestling.
Okay. But I think that some of the fans, there's a frustration with like the creative direction of WWE, and I feel like it happens like I mentioned, our fandom comes in waves probably because of the creative direction, kind of has these highs and these lows, and we're arguably in a low point of creativity. They're making more money than ever, and it's kind of put them in a creative rut. It's a lot of what they do is confusing, directionless. The product is polished. It's beautiful. Everything they spend money like crazy.
It looks great.
Yeah, presentation is top notch, but the narrative drive is missing there.
So maybe it's kind of like the presentation took center stage instead of the actual
Pretty much.
quality.
Yeah.
product.
I'd say they're basically like the Fast and the Furious.
They
of
sold
professional
out.
wrestling. I mean, one might argue that they sold out, and maybe they provide a service for an audience that just isn't the audience that they had been servicing in years past. What about you, Gabe? So this new league, Link touched upon where we are now, these big jumps or returns to the industry. And I don't know if you can capture like how significant. It's a whole history getting into who CM Punk is, who Bryan Danielson is, but what kind of drew you to it now, today in 2011? I mean, 21.
I'm sorry.
I'm living in the past.
Am I graduating high
what's-
school?
Am I still in Guam?
2021.
All right, so I think for me, when I got the whole F-bomb drop, I kind of steered away from wrestling. On social media, like with the rise of social media, becoming so prevalent, every once in a while, like I wasn't watching wrestling at all, like on TV or anything. So sometimes on social media, like the highlights would pop up, like some old wrestler came back. Undertaker was still fighting and stuff like that. So every now and then I'd see people that had left, like big stars that had left, come back as surprise return and stuff. I'd see the highlights. I'd see the big stuff that happened, but I really wouldn't follow along. And because most of the time I feel like the identity that I had in wrestling was based off of what you guys would say, because I knew that you guys were still really big fans. I had kind of departed. I went my own way. I decided I pursued different sports like soccer and things like that. So my wrestling identity was kind of in you guys. Like,
Right.
I just trusted what you'd say. If you recommended something, I'd check it out. But not really. I really didn't search for it on my own.
Yeah, and a caution to our listeners, remember that your fandom is important because people depend on you to make their opinions. So much of what we say shapes, like, I know I'm the resident geek where like people are like, hey, this movie, what you think? Is it good? Should I go watch
Yeah.
it? You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. So like that's what you guys were for me in the wrestling world. And so I guess once I started coming, I moved back to Miami, and I was able to obviously spend more time with my family, with you guys. And all I remember was, this was a couple of months ago as well. You guys were raving about this new company, AEW, and I wasn't so like sold onto getting into wrestling again. It was just kind of like, oh, just thinking the past thing. Like, I just thought it was
It
more
was
the
a
same.
phase. You moved on.
Yeah, like you guys were still into it, and that's cool. And I mean, there was some times where
Wrestling's forever.
I would come over, and like you guys were watching wrestling, and like, yeah, I was nice to spend time with you guys, but I really wasn't interested.
Uh-huh.
And then sometimes I would be like, oh, that's interesting, but really wouldn't give it a second look. And then there was this one time where I watched AEW with you guys, a show of AEW, and I can't remember who exactly fought, but it was a Dynamite taping, and I was like, man, this is actually really cool. Match after match, I was just like, that was really sick, because I think I'd realized, like, I'd gotten over the whole F-bomb, the whole F-word thing, where I was like, no, these people are throwing themselves, these people are hitting them, these people are getting hit. That's not ketchup, that's real blood. And it was just,
It's John Wick.
it was so entertaining to watch. It was so captivating to watch. And after that, I was like, oh, maybe I should give it another shot. And so little by little, I would come over and watch some stuff. I do my due diligence sometimes on the internet. And then there was a couple of matches where, like, I saw the Young Bucks, and they had a match, and I remember I was like, man, these guys are amazing. These guys are absolutely incredible. And then came the big pay-per-view, which by that time I'd kind of been getting into it. We went to a show, I believe. And that's when I was kind of like, this is more than just kind of watching because you guys are telling me to watch. This is more of like, I'm interested. I want to watch this. This is quality wrestling. This is the stuff that like I liked as a kid. And even then, like, once like those couple of weeks that happened, there was like a Dynamite show, and then there was the pay-per-view, All Out, I believe, right?
Yeah.
All Out happened, and once that happened, like, CM Punk had come a couple of weeks before, and CM Punk, for me, like, I hadn't watched him wrestle a lot, but I knew his name. He was that big that, like, I knew who he was.
And his fallout with the industry was huge. Like,
Yeah.
so many people, they might not have known who CM Punk was, but they knew that he walked away from WWE when he was on top, and that it was a nasty divorce, to say the least.
Exactly. And I think when he came out, I remember seeing that. Like, I remember seeing a video of it because I didn't watch it live. But even watching a video of it it gave me chills. Like, the stadium was going crazy, and it was incredible to watch, I think, in my opinion. And then came All Out, and that whole entire show was just fantastic. If you ever have a chance to watch, I really recommend it. But yeah, so after these past couple of weeks, months, AEW sold me on it. It's quality wrestling week in and week out, and I'm in it now for long. I see what you guys find. I see how you see it, I think.
No, yeah, I'm glad that it's paying out now, because it's been years of like, oh man, this is kind of boring.
And it's
You get
always
me?
in the background, even if it was in the main thing.
Yeah,
you
it's
would
always
like
there.
say, oh, I should check this show out. I should watch.
Yeah,
that.
like I'd watch some shows, like, all right, check this guy out, check wrestlers out. But now the product is so good that I'm not even embarrassed to say that I'm a wrestling fan. Like, before, like, I wouldn't tell other people. Like, I should mention wrestling stuff to you guys.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, like, I went to Comic-Con this year in New York, the New York City Comic-Con, and I went to it. They had an AEW panel, and no shame, I brought my friends along. I was like, listen, I'm going to this panel. You can come with me or not, but like, it's like a part of me. It's a part of who I am now.
You know what I think is super funny? And there's this old like Roddy Piper, who was also a wrestler, movie called They Live, where you like put on the glasses and you can see like who the like invaders are or whatever. And I think when you're a wrestling fan, it's like putting on the glasses because you might have gone to Comic-Con and not even noticed the wrestling presence if you weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, who's that guy? That guy's weird. I don't know. There's a panel going on. What these letters? I don't. You know. But now you like see it everywhere. Like if you're in tune in the conversation, you see the references to it.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned like when we went to that show early on. I know there was like a wrestler, Malachi Black, who had just come and he debuted that night, like in Miami, and that's been kind of like the influx of talent that's been coming. Either their contracts expired, or they asked for their release, or they were
from
released.
WWE.
Yeah, from WWE to AEW, and it's like exciting because it's a new league, and like you can see big players coming. It's attracting top talent. Each of us has like a different perspective. I know you're a big sports guy, and I know like those like talent exchanges and big moves is like a big part of the fandom.
Yeah, no, this was a crazy time, I think, with all the transfers, all the moves, and a lot of different sports. I mean, me being a huge soccer football fan, arguably the two best players of all time switched from teams. Messi and Ronaldo had left at big moves. And this was really coinciding with Bryan Danielson going to AEW, Adam Cole going to AEW. There was so many different, there was so much traffic that it's like, wow, this is really weird. Like my new world of wrestling and my familiar old world of soccer were kind of and different sports as well were kind of coming together. Yeah. And it was really exciting.
And it's funny that you said that two biggest stars, because to me, Danielson and Punk, that's who they are. They're the biggest stars, arguably, of this generation. I would argue that they're in the conversation for all time. I've flown to New York. Obviously, New York is awesome. I have family there, visiting there. But I knew I was going to New York. I was like, I'm going to a Ring of Honor event to see Bryan Danielson, pre-WWE, CM Punk. I was following these guys wherever they went, their trajectory. These are all-time greats. And it's funny because that's where we're at now. AEW is emergent. It's growing. There's a changing landscape there. But with that, with the growth, also kind of comes decay or kind of shifts in priorities in other areas. Talent's leaving WWE. Now they have the job of developing their own. Link mentioned that NXT used to be the place where these independent wrestlers would go to get national exposure. Now they're going to AEW, or they're leaving NXT to go to AEW. So they've kind of rebranded NXT, and it's NXT 2.0. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this. What do you know? Do you know anything about this?
I hate WWE. I don't care.
Okay.
I feel like we're two sides of the coin on here.
Right.
I remember I went to a couple of NXT shows with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. The good old days.
Yeah.
And then, to my knowledge, WWE bought them?
No, they were always...
okay.
Basically, NXT was WWE's answer to Ring of Honor and the independents. It's okay, you guys like that kind of wrestling?
Here.
We're going to create this little division where we do that. Get them ready for our TV show. We'll put it on the network, and that's a whole other conversation, the network. Streaming, before it was big, WWE went all in really early on, and it paid off for them.
Yeah, so, I mean... Aside from that, I just heard that kind of WWE is kind of revamping NXT,
right?
And they were doing some different things, but to my knowledge, I think you can shed some more light on it.
Yeah,
it sucks.
Okay, you haven't even seen it, man.
You have to see it.
I've tuned in sparingly. It's different. It's definitely, I would say, 2.0, even though it's really NXT 3.0 or 4.0, but 2.0 is really kind of I hate to use the negative term, but the death of what we knew as NXT and kind of the rebirth of a new direction. It's not one I'm terribly interested in. I know they're trying to move away from talent like the one in an AEW, and if anything, it's a shame because it's pushing me further apart from them. And the other side of this new landscape is Ring of Honor. This is a hot topic right now. Ring of Honor is where so much of the talent came from, the last 10 years.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, 20 years. You're right, because it's not 2011. It's 2021.
It's not?
Yeah, I was confused about that. It's
but they were popular in around 2002 2. You get me? Not that they were popular, but that's where people like CM Punk,
Yeah.
Bryan Danielson,
And then they
AJ
had that
Styles,
resurgence
yeah.
when they had the Young Bucks and
Young
Cody
Bucks, yeah.
Rhodes, and they like everything that AEW was happening in Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And I hate to say they dropped the ball, but they weren't able to capitalize on that. They weren't able to invest further, and now they're kind of restructuring. Basically, they've released everyone from their contracts. They're gonna try the super indie approach. We'll see how that goes, but basically, Ring of Honor, as we know it, is also done. So it's funny because things are changing, and when we decided to do this topic for this episode, I really didn't think we'd be talking about this early on. Wrestling's always been on the table. It's always been a big part of it, but it's like, as I mentioned at the beginning, such a niche product. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Such a niche product. Niche. No, I don't think that's right.
Elitist link.
Okay. Such a niche product that I was like, oh, we really have to like earn our ethos with the audience before we touch upon something like that, before they're willing to listen to us for like about an hour, talk about that. But now's the time to talk about it, because if you're not into it, now's the time to get in on the ground floor.
Because it's the hottest sports entertainment thing in the world.
That's right.
That's right. So in order to kind of wrap up our discussion, I want to ask you guys, what's your Mount Rushmore?
And by Mount Rushmore, you mean, obviously the monument here in the United States in North Dakota where, like, they have the presidents. Like, I'm not sure why they chose those specific presidents.
That's a deep cut. It's in North Dakota. I don't know.
Yeah,
I could say that.
I don't know. I could be wrong. South Dakota.
Elitist link, dropping knowledge.
I think it's in North Dakota. It could be South Dakota. I don't know. There's no reason why I would ever be there. But, yeah, so when we talk about your wrestling Mount Rushmore, it's like your top 4 favorite wrestlers of all time. Like, who you think are the GOATs. So for me, my top 4, like I mentioned earlier, growing up, I used to love this luchador called Rey Mysterio. So in my opinion, Rey Mysterio is in my top. He is the greatest luchador of all time. Mm-hmm. He's in my Mount Rushmore. After that comes, in my opinion, the greatest Hispanic wrestler of all time, Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand what Eddie Guerrero means to the Hispanic community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
much in the same way Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, exactly. But I think might be maybe even more.
I think so.
I remember when Eddie Guerrero beat Brock Lesnar for the belt, how crazy everyone went. Yeah. And then the next time, like, they had SmackDown and he came down, like, everyone just went crazy for Eddie. Like, and not only was he just a charismatic person, but he's like a great wrestler.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
A great technical wrestler, knew how to tell a story, was hilarious.
And I think those two men brought Lucha Libre, the Mexican tradition, to mainstream audiences.
Yes, so to me, those two I love those two. From there, I go to Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan. Like, I was not fortunate enough to be watching ROH when you were watching it. I was probably 10.
Yeah.
But in college, once I started watching NXT, all I did was I would go to YouTube. And I would be in the cafeteria of my college and just be by myself in a table watching, like, ROH matches with Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
Bryan Danielson, I'm sorry. And I just fell in love with Bryan Danielson. Not only is he an amazing wrestler, I mean, he might be the greatest. I think he might be the best wrestler at the moment. He's just an overall great guy. Like, his character really attracts me. Like, man, I want to hang out with this guy. And then the last person in my wrestling Mount Rushmore is Sami Zayn / El Generico. He is the person that brought me back into wrestling.
Yeah. And
I think he's a great wrestler. Now that he doesn't have a mask anymore, he's good with the mic. He can tell a great story, and like I said, I love this guy, man. Such a great wrestler, and I can't wait for him to go to AEW at some point.
Oh, we can only hope.
We can only hope. But all his indie friends, are there. So.
Yeah. And his best friend's contract's running out too.
So yeah, his contract's coming. So let's see. But those are my 4 people. I have Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Bryan Danielson, and Sami Zayn. What about you, Gabe?
I think for me, a shoo-in is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Oh, definitely.
He's probably my favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
Second up would be The Rock. The Rock's just...
Oh, yeah.
The Rock is kind of just... He's kind of like the guy that... He's kind of like the money. Like him and Shawn Michaels, main eventer. Like, I don't know. What more can you say? Like, it's The Rock. Everybody knows him. He's another culture phenomenon.
Also, we're from Miami, so
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He's us. He's one of us.
Yeah.
One
He's not
of
the
us.
best though.
He is not the best in Miami.
Yeah.
Third would have to be Eddie Guerrero. His match is like, at first, he's kind of like the first heel during his heel run where I was just like, man, this guy's a bad guy, but I can't help but root for him.
Yeah.
I don't think he never felt like a bad guy to me.
No,
It doesn't
there was
yeah,
things.
it doesn't matter how evil he was. If he was like, I remember he was claiming to be Rey Mysterio, the father of Rey
Yeah,
Mysterio's
like-
child, and he was like literally taking custody away from him. And I was like, all right, this guy's really evil. And then he came out with this shirt that said, "I'm your papi,"
And he sold you.
and I was like, this guy's the best.
And then last up on that list, I think is gonna be Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Stone.
That's another
Oh,
one, yeah.
that is a great one.
You'd be on my list if there were 6 people in Mount Rushmore.
That's good, but there's only 4, right, in South Dakota. South,
No,
It's
back
actually
no,
South Dakota. Yeah,
back in 2011 in North Dakota, there was 6.
there was
spots.
6.
there
Yeah,
was 6,
then they were relocated.
That's all right. So
Yeah,
those are my 4.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I cheated by going last so that I could include people that weren't on your list. Like, let's be honest, Eddie would be in all of our Mount Rushmores, but you mentioned him twice, so I'm gonna go ahead with, and this is okay. So we're talking about talent, overall impact, and I know this isn't a good time because he's kind of a little canceled right now. But the Nature Boy Ric Flair, his body of work is like.
Oh, that's not where I thought you were gonna go.
Super amazing. Oh no, he who shall remain nameless. Yeah, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. It's just like he was great in the '80s. I've seen all the tapes. He was great in the '90s when I was growing up, and even the 2000s. He's like an old man, like going through tables and barbed wire and falling off ladders. Like the man can reinvent himself in every generation. Then Bret the Hitman Hart. The other guy on my Mount Rushmore is Bret Hart. For every Shawn, there's a Bret. There's the guy who's flashy, like Shawn, high flying, and then there's the guy who grounds him. The guy who just everything he does is beautiful and thought of. I mean, if Punk is Shawn Michaels, then Bryan Danielson is the excellence of execution. Bret Hart.
Best there ever was.
And then Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle's on my Mount Rushmore. This guy was a beast. I followed him all through WWE and then into Impact Wrestling. I actually saw him win the gold medal on TV in 1996 because wrestling, professional wrestling, made amateur wrestling one of the only sports I was super interested in watching every 4 years at the Summer Olympics.
Also, I think Kurt Angle's the person that made me realize that wrestling is like an Olympic sport and not like throwing people through tables.
He gave it legitimacy in a way that for example, Brock Lesnar gives it with his MMA background and his like legit world heavyweight championships, and then
his size.
Yeah, that too, and his scariness. And then the last guy on my Mount Rushmore, if you have Bryan Danielson, like I have CM Punk. CM Punk is an iconoclasm. He is the cult of personality, to follow the cliche. So that would be my Mount Rushmore.
Those are good. Now to end this episode, I like to always recommend people stuff, right? So I guess what I'm going to ask both of you is to recommend one match to our listeners, so they can go watch it somewhere on YouTube, or 1 or 2 matches so they can watch it and see what they see in those wrestlers that you're talking about, like that you see. See what you see. Let them see what you see in these wrestlers. I guess I'll go. One match that I will recommend to you guys is a match that happened in NXT TakeOver. I'm not sure which TakeOver, but it was fairly new in the beginning.
Yeah, early in the network era.
Network era, yes. And it's Adrian Neville, a.k.a. Pac, versus Sami Zayn, a.k.a. El Generico, for the NXT Championship. And like I know when I described wrestling, I talked about like a battle between good and evil. This is a match that demonstrates a battle between good and evil. This is, in my opinion, one of the true underdog stories right here. Sami Zayn coming up and beating Neville for the championship, and I should
Spoiler
love.
alert.
Yeah.
My bad.
Oh yeah,
Elitist link.
you were in the drama.
Yeah, my bad.
That's from NXT Takeover. Our Evolution is the name of the show.
Yeah, that's the one where Kevin Owens came in. Yeah, and this. But yeah, like I said, Sami Zayn's one of my favorites, and Pac is awesome. And just seeing them fight, tell a beautiful story, and I literally cried watching that match. Very few things in life make me cry. Wrestling is one of those. What about you, Gabe or George?
Yeah, actually, I'll go. So it's super hard to say, like, oh, see a match, because we talk about storytelling on this show. We talk about characters, and that kind of drives your interest in a match. So it's hard, like, in a vacuum to say, go watch this match without the context. Hopefully your match has a video package before, because they do a great job, like, telling those stories in those video packages. But it just pure technique. Christopher Daniels versus Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles, TNA Unbreakable 2005. It's a 3-way match between the ground guy, the high flyer, and the brute, right? And the beautiful magic that these 3 men put together, it will define like a generation of 3-ways, which is like not a popular way because it's difficult. There's a lot of moving pieces. Wrestling fans typically like the one-on-one, but if you had to sell a 3-way, this is the match to show you. So Daniels, Joe, AJ, Unbreakable 2005.
What about you, Gabe?
I would say, I guess you guys kind of have some classics. I have an instant classic that was a couple of months ago, I believe.
Just a few weeks, really.
Yeah, it was the Lucha Bros versus the Young Bucks for the Tag Team Championship at the pay-per-view All Out. And to be honest, that match was incredible, but I'd have to recommend that entire pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Like if you could
yeah,
see
for sure. I think it
highlights or
might be-
something, it's one of the I didn't have the opportunity to watch it live. It was just a very busy weekend, but I saw some of the highlights and I was like, nah, I have to watch this whole thing live. So I went back. I didn't really know anything going into it. And then I watched the whole match on replay. I mean, the whole pay-per-view on replay. And it blew my mind. It gave me chills. And it was like 2 days, 3 days after the fact. And for me, I think that match was kind of like AEW. Like the whole entire pay-per-view was kind of like saying AEW we're real. We're in this game and we're serious.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you don't know of like the appearances that came out, like you can just tell that it's big.
You can feel, yeah.
You can feel
you
the
could tell
energy
something.
around it.
These are important people for some reason.
Yeah.
Because there was people that I didn't know, such as like Adam Cole and stuff like that. And now Adam Cole's one of my favorites in AEW. I did a whole deep dive on his career. I've seen highlights of his different matches that he's had, and it's incredible. And it's like opened my eyes to like things that happened so long ago, and they're kind of finding new life.
Yeah, they're paying off now.
Where it is now. So it's like you can be a fan of any like of however duration. Like you can be a longtime fan, an intermediate fan, or like a re-emerging fan. I guess I would say from my case. And I just think that whole pay-per-view is kind of like the epitome of the excitement that is going on right now. And if you have some time week to week, maybe catch a show or two, because every week for me, what I've seen has been fantastic from AEW.
I might say that pay-per-view All Out might be one of the best pay-per-views of all time.
And that's crazy thing to say with so little like space in between, but man,
there was not a dull moment.
Yeah.
There was not like a skip moment where it's like, let me fast forward this. Like every single part of it was exciting and captivating.
Yeah. I would argue there was one, and you knew exactly why it was happening, when it was happening. You know what I mean? Like it served its purpose. You know, and we follow these stories. We look up these personalities, these characters. Why? Because they drive us. Because we see ourselves in these men and women who gear up and put their bodies and sometimes even their lives on the line. The reality is, as Link mentioned earlier, good versus evil, right versus wrong. The stories that we tell, they reflect the society we are, and they also shape the narratives that we apply in our own lives. So ultimately, whether your heroes are Jedis with sabers, whether they wear capes or they're gearing up boots and tights, they're telling those stories that keep driving us back to them time after time, generation after generation. And as we continue to search for that driving force, that device that keeps us moving forward, we continue to do that week in and week out. And until next time, keep on searching.